Chapter 10 of The Side of the Angels by Basil King. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Simon Evers. Chapter 10. But Thor was pleased with the idea that his father could scarcely refuse him the lease. He would, in fact, make it worth his while not to do so. Rosie Fay and those who belonged to her might therefore feel solid ground beneath their feet and go on working, and, if need were, suffering, without the intolerable dread of eviction. It would be a satisfaction to him to accomplish this much, whatever the dictates of honour might oblige him to forego. He felt, too, that he was getting his reward, when, after Jim's departure, Rosie nodded through the glass of the hothouse, giving him what might almost be taken for a smile. He forbore to go to her at once, keeping that pleasure for the end of his visit. After seeing his patient, there were generally small directions to give the daughter which afforded pretext for lingering in her company. His patient was getting better, not through ministrations of his own, but through some mysterious influence exerted by Reuben Hilary. As a man of science and a sceptic, Thor was slightly impatient of this aid, even though he himself had invoked it. He was halfway up the stairs on his way to the bedroom in the mansard roof, when, on hearing a man's voice, he paused. The voice was saying, with that inflection in which there was no more than a hint of the brogue, "Now that's what we were talking of the last time I was here. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. There's the two great plagues of human existence, fear and trouble, staggered for you at a blow. And you do believe in God now, don't you?" Thor had turned to tiptoe down again when he heard the words, spoken in the rebellious tones with which he was familiar, modulated now to an odd submissiveness. "I don't know whether I do or not. Isn't there something in the Bible about, 'Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief'?" "There is, and it's a good way to begin." Thor was out in the yard before he could hear more. Standing for a minute in the windy sunshine, he wondered at the curious phenomenon presented by men in evident possession of their faculties, who rely for the dispersion of human care on means invisible and mystic. The fact that in this case he himself had appealed to the illusion rendered the working of it none the less astonishing. His own method for the dispersion of human care, and the project was dear to him, was by dollars and cents. It was, moreover, a method as to which there was no trouble in proving the efficiency. He took up the subject of her mother with Rosie, who with the help of Antonio was rearranging the masses of azaleas, carnations, and poinsettias after the depletion of the Christmas sales. "She's really better, isn't she?" Rosie pushed a white azalea to the place on the stand that would best display its dome-like regularity. "She seems to be." "What do you think has helped her?" She gave him a queer little sidelong smile. "You're the doctor. I should think you'd know." He adored those smiles, constrained, unwilling, distrustful smiles that varied the occasional earnest looks that he got from her green eyes. "But I don't know. It isn't anything I do for her." She banked 2 or 3 azaleas together, so that their shades of pink and pomegranate red might blend. "I suppose it's Dr. Hilary." "I know it's Dr. Hilary, but he isn't working by magic. If she's getting back her nerve, it isn't because he wishes it on her, as the boys say." Suspecting all his approaches, she confined herself to saying, "I'm sure I don't know," speaking like a guilty witness under cross-examination. The assiduity of his visits, the persistency with which he tried to make her talk, kept her the more carefully on her guard against betraying anything unwarily. But to him the reserve was an added charm. He called it shyness, or coyness, or maidenly timidity, according to the circumstance that called it forth. But whatever it was, this apathy to his passionate dumb show piqued him to a frenzy infused with an element of homage. Any other girl in her situation would have come halfway at least towards a man in his. His training having rendered him analytical of the physical side of things, he endeavoured, more or less unsuccessfully, to account for the extraordinary transformation in himself, whereby every nerve in his body yearned and strained towards this hard, proud little creature, who, too evidently, as yet at any rate, refused to take him into account. She made him feel like a man signalling in the dark, or speaking across a vacuum through which his voice couldn't carry, while he was conscious at the same time of searchings of heart at making the attempts to do either. He was beset by these scruples when, after taking his runabout from the garage in order to go to town, he met Lois Willoughby in the square. On the instant he remembered dear Love's counsel of a few days earlier. You'd have to ease the first one off a bit. Whatever was to be his ultimate decision, the wisdom of this course was incontestable. As she paused, smiling, expecting him to stop, he lifted his hat and drove onward. Perhaps it was only his imagination that caught in her great velvety brown eyes an expression of surprise and pain, but whether his sight was accurate or not, the memory of the moment smote him. The process of easing the first one off would probably prove difficult. I shall have to explain to her that I was in a hurry, he said, to comfort himself as he flew onward into town. The explanation would have been not untrue, since he was already overdue at his appointment with Mr. William Darling, his grandfather's executor. It was the second of the meetings arranged for giving him a general idea of the estate he was coming into. At the first he had gone over the lists of stocks, mortgages, and bonds. Today, with a map of the city and the surrounding country spread out, partially on the desk and partially over Mr. Darling's knees as he tilted back in a revolving chair, Thor learned the location of certain bits of landed property which his grandfather, 20 or 30 years before, had considered good investments. The astuteness of this ancestral foresight was illustrated by the fact that Thor was a richer man than he had supposed. While he would possess no enormous wealth, according to the newer standards of the day, he would have something between $30,000 and $40,000 of yearly income. "That," Mr. Darling explained with pride, "at a very conservative rate of investment. You could easily have more, but if you take my advice, you'll not be in a hurry to look for more till you need it. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. You surely understand that." Thor was not sure that he did understand it. He was not sure, and yet he hesitated to ask for the elucidation of what was intended perhaps to remain cryptic. In a small chair drawn up beside Mr. Darling's revolving seat of authority, his elbow on his knee, his chin supported by his fist, he studied the map. "I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings," the lawyer declared again, "either before or after the fact." This time an intention of some sort was so evident that Thor felt obliged to say, "Do you mean anyone in particular, sir?" The trustee threw the map from off his knees, and rising, walked to the window. He was a small, neat, sharp-eyed man of fresh, frosty complexion, his exquisite clothes making him something of a dandy, while his manner of turning his head, with quick little jerks and perks, reminded one of a bird. At the window he stood with his hands behind his back, looking out over the jumble of 19th-century roofs, out of which an occasional skyscraper shot like a tower, to where a fringe of masts and funnels edged the bay. He spoke without turning round. "I don't mean anyone in particular, unless there should be anyone in particular to mean." With this oracular explanation Thor was forced to be content, and as the purpose of the meeting seemed to have been accomplished, he rose to take his leave. Mr. Darling was quick in showing himself not only faithful as a trustee, but cordial as a man of the world. "My wife would like you to come and see her," he said, in shaking hands. "She asked me to say, too, that she hopes you and your brother will come to the dance she's going to give for Elsie in the course of a month or two. You'll get your cards in time." Warmly expressing the pleasure this entertainment would give him, while knowing in his heart that he wouldn't attend it, the young man took his departure. But no later than that evening he began to perceive why the oracle had spoken. Claude, having excused himself from dressing for dinner on the grounds of another mysterious engagement with Billy Cheever, and Mrs. Masterman having retired upstairs, Thor was alone in the library with his father. It was a mellow room, in which the bindings of long rows of books, mostly purchased by Grandpa Thorley in sets, admirable white marble chimney-piece in a Georgian style, and a few English 18th-century prints added by Archie Masterman himself, disguised the heavy architectural taste of the 60s. Grandpa Thorley had built the house at the close of the Civil War, the end of that struggle having found him, for reasons he was never eager to explain, a far richer man than its beginning. He had built the house not on his own old farm, which had already been absorbed into the suburban portion of the city, but on a 10-acre plot in County Street, which, with its rich bordering fields, its overarching elms, and its lofty sites, was revealing itself even then as the predestined quarter of the wealthy. So long as there had been no wealthy, County Street had been only a village highway, but the social developments following on the Civil War had required a Faubourg Saint-Germain. In this house Miss Louisa Thorley had grown up and been wooed by Archie Masterman. It had been the wooing of a very plain girl by a good-looking lad, and had received a shock when Grandpa Thorley suspected other motives than love to account for the young man's ardour. Her suitor being forbidden the house, Miss Thorley had no resource but to meet him in the city on the 7th of March, 1880, and go with him to a convenient parsonage. Thor was born on the 10th of February of the year following. 2 days later, the young mother died. Grandpa Thorley himself held out for another 10 years, when his will revealed the fact that he had taken every precaution to keep Archie Masterman from profiting by a penny of the Thorley money. So strict were the provisions of the document that on the father was thrown the entire cost of bringing up and educating Louisa Thorley's son. But Archie Masterman was patient. He took a lease of the Thorley house when Darling and Darling as executors put it in the market, and paid all the rent it was worth. Moreover, there had never been a moment in Thor's life when he had been made to feel that his maintenance was a burden unjustly thrown on one who could ill afford to bear it. For this consideration the son had been grateful ever since he knew its character, and was now eager to make due return. For the minute he was moving restlessly about the room, not knowing what to say. From the way in which his father, who was comfortably stretched in an arm-chair before the fire, dropped the evening paper to the floor while he puffed silently at his cigar, Thor knew that he was expected to give some account of the interview between himself and the trustee that afternoon. Any father might reasonably look for such a confidence, while the conditions of affectionate intimacy in which the Masterman family lived made it a matter of course. The son was still marching up and down the room, smoking cigarettes rapidly and throwing the butts into the fire, when he had completed his summary of the information received in his 2 meetings with the executor. The father had neither interrupted nor asked questions, but he spoke at last. "What did you say was the approximate value of the whole estate?" Thor told him. "And of the income?" Thor repeated that also. "Criminal!" Thor stopped dead for an instant, but resumed his march. He had stopped in surprise, but he went on again so as to give the impression of not having heard the last observation. "It's criminal," the father explained with repressed indignation, "that money should bring in so trifling a return." He said it was very conservatively invested. "It's damned idiotically invested. Such incompetence deserves an even stronger term. If my own money didn't earn more for me than that, well, I'm afraid you wouldn't have seen Vienna and Berlin." The remark gave Thor an opening he was glad to seize. "I know that, father. I know how much you've spent for me, and how generous you've always been, with Claude to provide for too. And now that I'm to have enough of my own, I want to repay you every—" "Don't hurt me, my boy. You surely don't think I'd take compensation for bringing up my own son? It's not in the least what I'm driving at. I simply mean that now that the whole thing is coming into your own hands, you'll probably want to do better with it than has been done heretofore." Thor said nothing. There was a long silence before his father went on. "Even if you didn't want me to have anything to do with it, I could put you in touch with people who'd give you excellent advice." Thor paced softly, as if afraid to make his footfalls heard. Something within him seemed frozen, paralyzed. He was incapable of a response. "Of course," the father continued gently, with his engaging lisp, "I quite understand why you shouldn't want me to have anything to do with it. The new generation is often distrustful of the old." Thor beat his brains for something to say that would meet the courtesies of the occasion without committing him, but his whole being had grown dumb. He would have been less humiliated if his father had pleaded with him outright. "Yet I haven't done so badly," Masterman continued, with pathos in his voice. "I have very little to begin with. When I first went into old Tugot's office I had nothing at all. I made my way by thrift, foresight, and integrity. I think I can say as much as that. Your grandfather Thorley was unjust to me, but I never resented it, not by a syllable." It was a relief to Thor to be able to say with some heartiness, "I know that, father." "Not that I didn't have some difficult situations to face on account of it. When the Tugot executors withdrew the old man's money, it would have gone hard with me if I hadn't been able to... Thor paused in his walk, waiting for what was coming. "If I hadn't been able to command confidence in other directions," the father finished quietly. Thor hastened to divert the conversation from his own affairs. "Mr. Willoughby put his money in then, didn't he?" "That was one thing." Masterman admitted coldly. Thor could speak the more daringly because his march up and down kept him behind his father's back. "And now, I understand, you think of dropping him." "I shouldn't be dropping him. That's not the way to put it. He drops himself automatically." The clock on the mantelpiece ticked a few times before he added, "I can't go on supporting him." "Do you mean that he's used up all the capital he put in?" "That's what it comes to. He's spent enormous sums. Times has been near to crippling me. But I can't keep it up. He's got to go. Besides, the big drunken oaf is a disgrace to me. I can't afford to be associated with him any longer." Thor came round to the fireplace, where he stood on the hearthrug, his arm on the mantelpiece. "But, Father, what'll he do?" "Surely that's his own lookout. Bet he's got money still. I didn't get all of it by any means." "No, but if you've got most of it—" Masterman shot out of his seat. "Take care, Thor. I object to your way of expressing yourself. It's offensive." "I only mean, Father, that if Mr. Willoughby saved the business—" "He didn't do anything of the kind," Masterman said sharply. "No one knows better than he that I never wanted him at all." But Thor ventured to speak up. "Didn't you tell Mother one night in Paris, when we were there in 1892, that his mother might as well come to you as go to the deuce? Mother said she hated business and didn't want to have anything to do with it. She hoped you'd let the Willoughbys and their money alone. Didn't that happen, Father?" If Thor was expecting his father to blanch and betray a guilty mind, he was both disappointed and relieved. "Possibly. I've no recollection. I was looking for someone to enter the business. It wasn't my ideal, the Lord knows, yet I might have said something about it, carelessly. Why do you ask?" The son tried to infuse his words with a special intensity, as, looking straight into his father's eyes, he said, "Because I remember the way things happened at the time." "Indeed? And may I ask what your memories lead you to infer? They've clearly led you to infer something." During the seconds in which father and son scrutinized each other, Thor felt himself backing down with a sort of spiritual cowardice. He didn't want to accuse his father. He shrank from the knowledge that would have justified him in doing so. To express himself with as little stress as possible, he said, "They lead me to infer that we've some moral responsibility towards Mr. Willoughby." "Really? That's very interesting. Now, I should have said that if I ever had any, I'd richly worked it off." It was perhaps to glide away from the points already raised that he asked, "Aren't you a little hasty in looking for moral responsibility? Let me see. Who was it the last time? Old Fay, wasn't it?" Thor flushed, but he accepted the diversion. He even welcomed it. Such glimpses as he got of his father's mind appalled him. For the present, at any rate, he would force no issue that would verify his suspicions and compel him to act upon them. Better the doubt. Better to believe that Willoughby had been a spendthrift. He would have no difficulty as to that, had it not been for those dogging memories of the little hotel in the Rue de Rivoli. Besides, as he said to himself, he had his own axe to grind. He endeavoured therefore to take the reference to Fay jocosely. "That reminds me," he smiled, though the smile might have been a trifle nervous, "that if you don't want to renew Fay's lease when it falls in, I wish you'd make it over to me." Disconcerted by the look of amazement his words called up, he hastened to add, "I take it on any terms you please. You've only got to name them." Masterman backed away to the large oblong library table strewn with papers and magazines. He seemed to need it for support. His tones were those of a man amazed to the point of awe. "What in the name of heaven do you want that for?" Thor studied his nerve by lighting a cigarette. "To give me a footing in the village. I'm going into politics." "Oh, Lord!" Thor hurried on. "Yes, I know how you feel, but to me it seems a duty." "Seems a what?" The son felt obliged to be apologetic. "You see, Father, so few men of the old American stock are going into politics nowadays." "Well, why should they?" "The country has to be governed." "Lots of fools to do that who are no good at anything else. Why should you dirty your hands with it?" "That isn't the way I look at it." "It's the way you will look at it when you know a little more about it than you evidently do now. Of course, with your money you'll have a right to fritter away your time in anything you please. but as your father I feel that I ought to give you a word of warning. You wouldn't be a masterman if you didn't need it, on that score." "What score?" "The score of being caught by every humbugging socialist scheme." "I'm not a socialist, father." "Well, what are you? I thought you were." "I'm not now. I've passed that phase." "Oh, that's something to be good at any rate." "With politics in this country as they are, and so many alien peoples to be licked into shape, it's no use looking for the States to undertake anything progressive for another 200 years. "Ah, want something more rapid firing?" "Want something immediate." "And you found it?" "Only in the conviction that whatever's to be done must be done by the individual. I've no theories any longer. I've finished with them all. I'm driven back on the conclusion that if anything is to be accomplished in the way of social betterment, it must be by the man-to-man process in one's own small sphere. If we could get that put into practice on a considerable scale, we should do more than the State will be able to carry out for centuries to come." "Put what into practice?" "The principle that no man shall let a friend or a neighbour suffer without relief when he can relieve him." "Thought you should have been God." "I don't know anything about God, father, but if I were to create a God, I should make that his first commandment." Marston squared himself in front of his son. "So that's behind this scheme of yours for taking over Fay's lease. You're trying to trick me into doing what you know I won't do of my own accord. What could you do with the lease but make a present of it to old Fay? Politics be hanged. Come now, be frank with me." Thor threw back his head. "I can't be wholly frank with you, father, but I'll be as frank as I can. I do want to help the poor old chap. You'd be sorry for him if you'd been seeing him as I have, but that was only one of my motives. Leaving politics out of the question, I have others, but I don't want to speak of them yet. Probably I shall never need to speak of them at all." Thor was willing that his father should say, "It's the girl." He contented himself with the curt statement, "I'm sorry, Thor, but you can't have the lease. I'm going to sell the place." "But, father," the young man cried, "what's to become of Fay?" "Is that what you asked me just now about Len Willoughby? What do you think I am, Thor? Am I in this world to carry every lame dog on my back?" "It isn't a question of every lame dog, but of an old tenant and an old friend." "Towards whom I have what you please to call a moral responsibility. Is that it?" "That's it, father, put mildly." "Well, I don't admit your moral responsibility, and what's more, I'm not going to bear it. Do you understand?" Thor felt himself growing white, with the whiteness that attended one of his surging waves of wrath. He clenched his fists. He drew away, but he couldn't keep himself from saying, quietly, with a voice that shook because of his very efforts to keep it firm, "All right, father. If you don't bear it, I will." He was moving towards the door when Archie called after him, "Thor, for God's sake, don't be a fool." He answered from the threshold over his shoulder, "It's no use asking me not to do as I've said, father, because I can't help it." He was in the hall when he added, "And if I could, I shouldn't try." End of chapter 10.